Tonight we're focusing in on Zoom with Galaxy AI on the new Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Ah, a baby tiger. Check out his claws as he prepares to pounce on that frog. Close one, but not as close as this Zoom. We can literally count the whiskers and... Oh look, Mum's here. Good thing I'm nowhere nearby. Go wild with Galaxy AI on the new S24 Ultra and zoom in on the epic day or night.
Get yours now at Samsung.com.
What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act Podcast, leveling up your life's journey. Welcome back to the Second Act Podcast with Michael and John. This week, we are going to be flying high and fast with a guest who knows a thing or two about fighter jets. Super exciting discussion today, and we are honored to have this guest on our show. And John, with that said, I'm going to hand it over to you for the intro.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's great to see you, man. We don't do this often enough throughout the week, and I feel like I need that dose of Michael in my life, and unfortunately, this is where we're getting it. But you know, we've had some amazing conversations with some prior military veterans, and man, a couple of them have come out, a couple haven't, but I'm always charged and excited to get somebody from the military, mainly because it's my expertise as well. But it just immediately there's the camaraderie, and there's, you know, just this thing that I don't get with a lot of other of our guests. And so today it's no different. And man, our guest is Michelle Curran, who I actually met last year in Las Vegas at the National Business Aviation Association conference. And man, we actually ended up sitting at a table together and conversing over life, the loss of friends and family, and over our service and the camaraderie that I was talking about earlier, and just a whole host of things. And I said, you know, it would just be really amazing to have you on the show. And she said yes. So man, here she is today. Her call sign is Mace, which I'll let her dig into later, but she grew up in a small town in northern Wisconsin with no family ties to aviation or military, but an internal drive to push herself out of comfort zones and explore what is possible. Led her to Air Force ROTC, which initially was a draw for Michelle as a way to pay for college, but became much more. Halfway through her college, after seeing a couple fighter jets take off close for the first time, she decided, like a lot of us, man, I'm going to be a pilot and fly fighter jets. If that story is not cool enough already, Michelle's flight journey takes her all over the world and eventually lands her in the best of the best fighter pilot world. But it was not all smooth sailing, as Michelle struggled at times to find her identity and confidence, but ultimately faced her fears and made some bold choices and persevered. As one of our small number of people to experience 9 Gs in an aircraft, which for those non-pilots out there is about 9 times your actual body weight using the gravitational calculation. Michelle went on to join the elite Thunderbird squadron as the lead solo just before embarking on her second act as the founder of Upside Down Dreams, she is a sought-after motivational speaker and best-selling children's book author who finds joy in empowering others to reach one's true potential. So outside of work, Michelle enjoys spending time with her family, rock climbing, mountaineering, and anything out in the great outdoors. And she's probably going to talk about it. She's going on a trip here soon too. So welcome to the show, Michelle. Man.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's good to see you again. It's nice to meet you, Michael. I feel like that was a solid intro. Like we could just wrap it up there and be like, we covered it all.
Well, you know, it's amazing what Chat GPT will pull out these days. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
That was not AI generated. That was
that's real life, man. Michelle,
that's real life.
it gives me goosebumps, reading through your bio and, when I get to read through some of the bios of people and just hear the amazing things that they've done in such a short amount of time. It's spectacular to see somebody excel at something truly, in remarkable ways at the level that you have done. So I'm really excited to dig into this episode.
No, I appreciate it. It was full of highs and lows, and I think we'll talk about both. I'm sure you can relate. The days are long in your military career, but the years are super fast, and the decade is really fast. And I can't believe it's already done. I'm sure you feel the same way, but I'm excited to dig into it.
Yeah. Shoot. Well, Michael, why don't you kick us off and let our audience get to know Michelle a little bit better?
I would love to. You ready to jump into it, Michelle?
Let's go.
Let's go. All right. We like to take our listeners through a life journey in our podcast episodes. So let's start at the beginning. You grew up in Wisconsin, a small town in Wisconsin, a place I'm very familiar with. My wife actually grew up in Minnesota and had a lot of family in Wisconsin. So I've been to Appleton and La Crosse and Milwaukee and Green Bay. I've done the whole Green Bay Packers tour, all that fun stuff. But tell us about your childhood and the things that inspired you early on and some of those important moments at a young age that helped shape who you are today.
Yeah, I'm disappointed I don't see a cheese head on your shelf in the background. I went to college in Minnesota, so I was like, I call Wisconsin and Minnesota kind of my home states. But yeah, I grew up in Medford, Wisconsin. It's about 4,000 people. It's very rural, so to go somewhere that had a tiny mall was an hour-plus drive. As a kid, it was like a big endeavor that we would do occasionally. My hometown got a Walmart while I was in college, and that was really big news. That was exciting. So it was in my family, the property that they own, that my parents still live on now, that I grew up on, is actually 7 miles outside of the 4,000 person town. Okay. So definitely grew up in the country. My grandparents were our neighbors. They ran a dairy farm. So I was kind of like a farm kid, but I didn't have to get up at 4 a.m. and do chores like a lot of my classmates in school did. So I got the fun parts of it, of, exploring the barn and building hay forts and finding like baby kittens in the spring and like all the baby animals I loved growing up. And just having so much space to play outside and climb trees and build forts, all the stuff. But then I kind of got to be a normal kid outside of that. And I was really shy, really introverted, but also very driven and adventurous, which sometimes seemed like a conflict. But at school, I would be kind of socially awkward, had a few close friends, definitely wasn't in the popular crowd, tried to kind of fly under the radar, hang back. But I was very driven to do well. So I got straight A's essentially all through school, which paid off later with that ROTC scholarship that we kind of already mentioned. But then when I was at home, I was hunting with my dad. I was, outside playing and building things and getting dirty and doing all that kind of stuff. And so the military felt like kind of a natural draw because it fulfilled all those desires for adventure, for kind of pushing yourself into the unknown, for pushing your body physically. And I wanted to travel. I did not want to stay in my small town. As good as it was to grow up in, I was ready to, see the world. Yeah. And I saw the military as a way to do that. So all of that combined with needing a way to pay for college and having the grades to get a scholarship is why I applied for Air Force ROTC and ended up going that direction. But I think if many of them probably have, if my like high school teachers could see what I'm doing now, they would be fairly shocked because I was kind of the nerd, right? Head down, getting really good grades, but don't call me in class because I don't want to be put on the spot in front of my peers. Don't make me present in front of anyone. And then I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and now I'm a keynote speaker, and I present, to thousands of people in a live audience. So it's a kind of a cool story of how much you can grow as a person. Yeah. I think when you push yourself to do the things that feel a little bit scary and a little bit uncomfortable.
So did you use the adventurous side of you to offset or balance out the shy side? Because I think I saw an interview of you talking about climbing a tree and hanging off, and your mom's like talking to you to get down from there, and like help us sort of understand how you dug down and grappled with some of that shyness and offset that with some of the adventurous spirit you had.
Yeah, my mom tells that story because I don't remember it. I think I was only like 3 years old, so not in my memory of climbing a tree like taller than our house. And she was just like turned her back for a second, then turns around and is like, oh no. Yeah, you come down from there and please do not fall. I made it through all of childhood with no broken bones, so
Nice.
I'd knock on wood, but I guess I'm an adult now, so they don't count anymore. But childhood success, no trips to the ER. But yeah, I think I was excited about, seeing what I was capable of. But at that time, that took the form more of pushing myself as an individual, whether that was getting into fitness kind of later on, or with academics, or with just like adventurous type stuff. But I was very much controlled by worrying about what other people thought of me and kind of how I would appear to my peers at school. So that kind of controlled what I did in that environment a little bit more. I was eventually able to overcome that. But even in my Air Force career, I still struggled with that, especially the first couple assignments.
Michelle, my teachers would be amazed at where I'm at these days as well, but I didn't have straight A's. I had pretty much straight C's. So it was just the fact that I graduated on time was impressed them. But I'm interested, you don't have any ties to the military, correct? No aviation ties?
No. So my grandpa was in World War II, as many of our grandparents were.
Right.
He was a lieutenant in the Navy, so he was an officer, but he passed away when I was 2 years old. So there was no, conversations being passed down there. The only thing is that his Navy trunk, his like big green metal trunk with Lieutenant Curran printed on the end of it, that had traveled all over the Pacific during World War II, was in my grandma's house.
That's awesome.
And when I was growing up, one of my favorite things to do was open it up, pull all the stuff out. I would try his uniforms on. I would look at the photos. His pipe and his spectacles were in there.
That's cool.
It was like everything was in there. Letters that he had written to my grandma, little trinkets he had collected all over the world. Yeah. And it felt like this treasure chest that I could look into as a small kid, and that like just transported me into this whole other world that I wasn't familiar with. And it was so exciting. Yeah. And so I say no family ties, as in my parents, I didn't come from a military family, but I think that might have planted the seed of kind 100%. Of the adventure that can come with being in the military.
Yeah, when you're talking about looking through that trunk, I mean, I can visualize it. You can smell it. It's almost tangible in your memory, because I had some of those moments in my life as well. And it does plant seeds, and it does create some sort of idea that maybe you don't act on then, but you come back to, and it's there kind of dormant until it's not, until it's active. But why did you choose Air Force ROTC as opposed to, Army, or what led you to that decision?
So my dad is the one that brought up ROTC in general. He had gone to UW-Madison, and he wasn't in ROTC, but he saw the cadets running around in their uniforms, and he just thought that I would fit in well and do well in that program. I was resistant at first, but the more I learned about it, the more I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's some cool opportunities here. And as we looked at the different branches, the idea of flying, even though at that time I wasn't sure I wanted to be a pilot, the idea of flying just felt adventurous and kind of fulfilled that feeling I'd always been seeking since I was small. And in my mind, the Air Force was synonymous with flying. I had no idea at that point, the different branches, the different aviation options. I mean, people now ask me which branch they should go into, and I talk about, do you want to stay at the Hilton, or do you want to stay in a tent, or do you want to just sleep outside on the ground? Yeah. I realize my audience I'm talking to right now, but
That's
it's
okay.
true.
I accepted my fate.
100%. There are big differences between the branches, and I'm glad I ended up in the Air Force. I think I fit into that community well, and it granted me a lot of opportunities. I honestly didn't know that much about all the options as a high schooler.
Yeah. So you just went with it. You start off on a path, and you're going, and Air Force ROTC opens up a little bit more of the aperture to what you could potentially get into. Does that begin to excite you at point in time and you think I'm all in, or are you still kind of looking back and thinking, I don't know if this military thing is just the right thing for me?
I quickly excelled in that environment. I made
Okay.
really close friends very quickly as a freshman in ROTC, and it was kind of the first time that I felt like I was with this peer group that I just really vibed well with, and it was like more than a couple people. It was a big group of us, and spent a lot of time together, and I'm still friends with most of them. So I was like pretty sold on the military part very quickly. But I went to college as a criminal justice major because I wanted to be an FBI agent.
Okay.
And so my grand plan, when I applied for the ROTC scholarship, is okay, I need a way to pay for college. I want to work for the FBI. I want to be kicking down doors as a special agent.
The shy girl from a small town in Wisconsin wants to be kicking down doors. I love it.
I'm a walking dichotomy. It's my whole life. I wanted to do that, and I looked at the FBI website and the things that made you competitive to apply, and it was like military experience, foreign language experience, criminal justice degree was on there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get my criminal justice degree. The Air Force is going to pay for it. I'm going to commission and try to go do OSI, Special Investigations, for 4 years. So I'll have kind of this natural background experience that'll be appealing to the FBI. I'll have paid back my scholarship time. I'm going to get out and apply to the FBI Academy. I'm like a 17-year-old, coming up with this plan. I go into ROTC.
Amazing.
I'm a criminal justice major. I graduated as a criminal justice major. But halfway through, we visit Tyndall Air Force Base, which is down in Florida, on a base visit through my ROTC unit. I get to see fighter jets up close for the first time. I had seen them fly over at a few different flyovers for things, but I get to stand on the ramp and watch two F-15s take off in full afterburner, and it was at dusk. It was like late in the day. I think they were taking off for a night flight.
Cool.
So the orange AB is just like glowing. The engines are, they vibrate your whole body when you do an afterburner takeoff, and I am just like goosebumps, jaw drop, forget the FBI. Like, how do I do that? And so that was the moment where I was like, okay, not only am I going to commission into the Air Force, but we're going to go all in on getting a pilot slot, and not just a pilot slot, but I want to fly fighters.
Yeah. And so you have this experience and you make this mental decision, like this is the direction you want to go. And is it as soon as you graduate, you're commissioned and head off to basic pilot training and on to F-16 pilot training? How did all that take place? Walk us through that next phase. And then, within that, having no any previous flight training or exposure to immediate family in the aviation world, just help the audience understand a little bit about that's going on in your life.
It's quite the journey. There's a big gap between deciding you want to be a fighter pilot and then actually becoming a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And so step one was to get a pilot slot out of ROTC. So you get your career path as you graduate and commission. And, those vary all kinds of things, finance, intel, pilot training is one of them. So that's kind of competitive to get a pilot slot, but as long as your GPA is decent and you're doing decent in the cadet wing, it's pretty doable. So I get a pilot slot. Now I go to pilot training, and like you mentioned, I don't have any flight experience. I have 0 general aviation time going into this. I'm also a criminal justice major, and I didn't quite realize how much technical knowledge was required. So it was definitely the drinking from a fire hose feeling at first, trying to learn just the basic principles of aerodynamics and physics. Like, I had obviously done the basic core curriculum in college, but I wasn't an engineering degree. And so it was a steep learning curve with that. And then there's actual hands-on part of flying and just learning how airspace works and the radio calls and all. It's just so much to learn at first. So there were points where it was very overwhelming, but I think I quickly caught up to where my peers who had their private pilot's license or were engineers were at. Like, after a few months, I felt like we were doing about the same. And then I kind of just took to flying pretty quickly in pilot training. So you fly the T6, single engine prop plane, 2 seats. It's pretty cool. It can fly like 300 knots plus and pull 6 Gs. So it's pretty capable. That's the training aircraft that everyone goes through in the Air Force. halfway through training, about 6 months in, the class splits into these different tracks. And there's one track called the fighter bomber track that goes and flies T-38s, which are the jet trainer. That's the little jet that's in like all the NASA training videos that you've seen, or like Armageddon. That's the one that they're in. So people have seen those quite a bit. Old airplane, but it's good for what it does as far as being a jet trainer. I had a class of 25 students in my pilot training class in general. We got 6 or 7, I think 7 spots into the T-38. So now the wicket, gets a little tighter. Yep. I make that cut. Now I'm in T-38, so we do that for another 6 months. As you get towards the end of that, you have something called drop night, where you get to find out the actual platform you're going to go fly in the Air Force. So basically every aircraft in the Air Force inventory is on the table, and it really depends on the needs of the Air Force, so how many pilots they need for each type of airframe, and then your class ranking. And we all knew that historically, based on previous classes, each pilot training class was getting maybe 1 to 2 fighter aircraft. And so 7 of us were eligible. 1 or 2 of us was probably actually going to get a fighter. So we were a really tight-knit class. We were really close friends, but you're also competing against those people that entire year. And the closer it got to drop night, you kind of see the rack and stack shake out. You know how people have done on their check rides, which is basically like an airborne test. You know how they've been doing on their academic tests. And so you don't get to see the class ranking ever on paper, but you have a general idea of where you fall. And so it was there was this one guy that was just clearly first. He had just crushed everything, and he wanted F-15 Strike Eagles. And then the second spot was up for grabs. It was between me and one other guy, and we were kind of neck and neck for the whole thing. And the final check ride I ended up doing really well on, and he had a little bit of struggles on. And so I thought I was pretty firmly in the second spot, but I still didn't even know if we were going to have 2 fighter aircraft available. But we filled out a dream sheet listing our preferences. I put F-16s first.
Okay.
And I ended up getting an F-16. So it was a surreal moment. They definitely messed with my head a little bit. They announced my airframe last out of 25 people.
Oh.
So I got to watch all of my friends go. And then they kind of toyed with me and told me I was going to be a FAPE, a first assignment instructor pilot, where you stay at the pilot training base as a teacher. And it was in Columbus, Mississippi, which is not necessarily the most highly sought after location to stay in, especially as a young lieutenant. Sure. And I was just it was so stressful, but they ended up, giving me an F-16. And from there, I went off to a year of F-16 training. So it's a long competitive journey.
So, there's a pattern in your life, it seems, where you're faced with these sort of unknown circumstances, these big challenges, but you sort of have this mindset where you just say, screw it, I'm going to do this, regardless of sort of how big that mountain is. So just help take our audience through overcoming that mental skepticism, if you will, when it comes to just taking the leap of faith and giving it all you got and persevering. Help our audience understand what goes through your head as a fighter pilot, that they can maybe apply in the civilian world.
Yeah, I think there were a few key times I've done that where I felt like the draw to go do whatever the thing was so powerful that I was willing to push past the feelings of potential failure and the fear of the unknown and all of those things. And seeing those jets take off was definitely one of those times. Realizing how much I loved the inspiration part of the Thunderbird mission, and that there was a potential to build a business around that as a speaker. That was another one of those times. So it's been some really big transitions that I've gone after with that mindset, but I definitely had other points in my career where smaller things I would really struggle with self-doubt and hold myself back from going after opportunities because I didn't want to fail in front of everyone. So I will not say that I'm perfect about being bold and brave and just courageously charging ahead with no doubts, because that's definitely not the case. I think it was a few key times I've done that and just had faith that I could figure it out along the way and make it happen.
But let's go back for a second, and we'll get into some kind of identity and confidence stuff. But not to mention, and I'll let you clarify for Michael and the audience, those that aren't in the military, but you're a female in a predominantly male world, and you're going through flight school, and you're competing for fighters. It's a big deal. You stand out, in at times when you don't want to stand out and you just want to fit in. Tell me about that.
100%. I think in ROTC, and when I set kind of this goal of becoming a fighter pilot as my big dream, I didn't really think about the role gender would have in it. It was just what I wanted to do. As I got into pilot training, it was kind of highlighted to me just constantly.
Yeah.
And not in a negative way. It was just highlighted. Right. And even the guys in my class that I was really good friends with, I would hear them, like if we would be all out together on a Friday night, I would hear them talking to other student pilots from other classes. And those guys would be asking about how the girl in their class was. And they'd be like, oh, well, luckily she's really cool. Like, it's fine. Like stuff like that. It was just like a topic of conversation. And then as we got close to that drop night that I mentioned, and I was really competing with one specific person, just how things had fallen. We were actually studying together for our very last check ride, and we both knew the weight that held for determining which one of us was going to be in that spot where we might get a fighter. And at one point, I think he was frustrated trying to cram for this check ride. And he said, I don't know why I'm even putting in all this effort. They're just going to give you a fighter to check the box. And that was like the first time anyone had said anything like that, just straight to me, like it was just a normal topic of conversation.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so taken aback that I didn't even try to defend myself or call him out. I was just like, guess I'm going to try extra hard to do really well on this check ride. The, more experienced, more confident version of me looking back on that, I wish I would have said something and been like, that's not how this program works. Like anyone who's been through flight training knows what the standards are, and there's no way that they're sending someone through that's not qualified.
Yep.
But I was like, oh, is that what people think? Like, is that why people think that I'm at the top of my class? And as I went off, and got one of the fighter jet spots, like, is that what they actually think? And so I distinctly remember that direct comment, which he probably doesn't even remember making at this point, because it was probably just, a flippant passing thing to him. I remember that 15 years later as like the first time that I became very aware of how big of a deal it was to other people.
Sure.
But as you said, there's standards. It's I think it's a meritocracy, right, in terms of skills and what you're able to do. So it's surprising to hear that kind of comment. Surprising in some ways and not surprising in others. But you persevered and won one of the fighter jets that were available to move into the next stage of your career, which is awesome.
Yeah, and for the audience, as Mace kind of alluded to, there's months and months to years of documentation on your flight progress, things that you excel at, things that you are not that great at, the things that you have to work on. I mean, it is flight report after flight report after flight report, all stacked up in your jacket. So it's not like this decision's made overnight for anybody to get to where they want to go. And so, kudos to you for persevering, even when those comments could have been made to your face or behind your back, and persevering because you knew what you wanted. You had your sights set on it, and you just kept performing to the level that the Air Force expected you to, and at times over exceeding what they expected. So kudos to you. And that's what got you your number one, your number one choice. So
yeah. And that comment, or to go back to what you just said, to pile on to that, there's this kind of, I know a lot of these people are trolls with no credibility, but there's definitely this, I guess, perspective on the internet that every time that a woman is highlighted for being the first, or any minority for being the first, or an all-female flight crew or whatever, and it makes a headline in some way, if you take a second to read those comments, which I'm not recommending that you do, but there will be so many that like talk about the standards being lowered.
Sure.
Like that is like the first argument that is brought up by so many people. And like you said, there's years of documentation. And the thing is that all of those different grade sheets, all of those different flights are with different people too.
Yep.
You know, it's not one person that holds the keys to the castle for that. It's different flight instructors with all different backgrounds, different genders, you know, different races. Like this is not one person on the base that is deciding who goes where. So it's just impossible that would even be how it worked. It's just frustrating because you can't argue with a brick wall. So it's a waste of your time.
And Michelle, we've had guests on who use maybe not that exact type of comment in their life journey, but some form of adversity as motivation. It helps them build more motivation. I mean, they're running around in some ways with a chip on their shoulder, like, you don't think I could do this? You watch. I'm going to do it. And they go and do it. Yeah.
I think that can be effective from personal experience.
Ladies and gentlemen.
What are you doing?
What do you mean?
Just keep it simple.
I'm making the promo.
Just keep it simple. Just say, hey, we're the Brav Bros. Two guys that talk about Bravo.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're the Brav Bros.
No.
Oh.
Dude, stop with the voice. Just keep it simple.
I've seen promos on TV, dude. This is how you get the fans engaged. This is how you get listeners. We're trying to get listeners here. If we just say, oh, we're two dudes that talk about Bravo, people are going to get tired of it already. We need some oomph.
All right, then fine. Let's try to do it with your voice.
Brav Bros.
Good job.
I wanna go back to your career in the Air Force, Michelle, and I know the feeling, and I can remember the day exactly how it was. But you leave flight training, you get your number one pick, you're trained up in the F-16, and now you head off to go to your first operational squadron. You're like, man, I think I've made it. But guess what? For the audience out there, you're back at the bottom of the barrel. You're starting brand new to a new group of people that you have to prove yourself to. And guess what? Just like everyone else, you struggle with identity and confidence. And I will say, you know, it's a little bit, now knowing some of your story, it's a little bit surprising, given now that I know a little bit of the early stages of your life and you getting into flight school and your determination. So tell us about that. Tell us about what led you up to your assignment in 2015 that helped you break through all of that and help you get your identity, help you get your confidence back.
Yeah, there's so much to answer in that question. So I was, you know, I'm a high achiever. Like I've always been driven. I like to set goals and then make them happen. And you saw it through my childhood with grades and scholarships. And then in college, same thing. I go to flight training. Odds are against me, but same thing. I'm able to work hard enough to over-prepare enough to make up for any experience gap that I had to start with. And so I am constantly proving people wrong. And I was definitely motivated by that. Same thing, I go to F-16 B course where you learn to fly the jet. I started to struggle a little bit there because each one of these courses you move up into where you start at the bottom again, the standards around you get so much higher. And so someone that excels in pilot training might struggle in fighter training because the bar is a lot higher. It's a lot more complicated. Things are happening a lot faster. And so I started to see that. I started to struggle with my identity and fitting in there more because the fighter pilot culture is also its own unique animal that you don't experience in pilot training because that's people from all different backgrounds teaching there, right? It's heavy aircraft, tankers. Each community has their personality. The fighter squadron's personality is more like you would imagine. It's more like type A, kind of overly confident, bordering on arrogant, very outspoken and kind of loud, and bravado is rewarded to a certain extent. Not like recklessness in the jet, but just being super confident is rewarded there.
Yeah.
And that's just not my natural personality. I'm more reserved, like I mentioned. And then the percentages of women in a fighter squadron are even lower than the rest of the Air Force and the rest of the pilot community. So when I came in, it was about 2% of fighter pilots in the Air Force that were women.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I speak to a lot of different audiences today as a speaker that are women in traditionally male careers.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, we really want to empower the women in our organization. I'll ask them what the percentages are. And they're like, well, only 30% of our organization is women. And I'm like, okay, I can touch on that, but 2% is like nothing. Like all of the female F-16 pilots at any given time all know each other because there's only a handful.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit better now. It's up to like 4%. So, 10, 15 years,
Yeah.
right, it's doubled. It'll continue to increase. I think more and more women are pursuing it. There's more representation, so they're seeing it as an option. But I was regularly the only woman in my squadron, and if I wasn't, there was one other woman in my squadron. So we were instantly best friends. And there's just unique challenges, like gear that doesn't fit, locker rooms that don't exist for you, ability to go to the bathroom in the aircraft, which sounds like a funny thing to talk about, but it's a huge stressor, and it's damn near impossible when you're a woman to go to the bathroom in a fighter cockpit. You figure it out eventually, but it's difficult. Just little things like that layer on the stress. And then you also feel like you're under a microscope.
Yep.
Because if you are bad at anything, now suddenly everyone thinks that female fighter pilots are bad at said thing. And so that was like this added responsibility where I felt like I was setting the reputation for all female fighter pilots. And then in my first squadron in Japan, Misawa, Japan, which was about 2012 when I got there, the squadron was going through a big transition. The Air Force was going through a big transition where they were trying to get rid of some of the fighter pilot culture that was a little bit more not PC. Some of the more over the top things, and there was heavy resistance to that.
Yep.
People were like, they're stealing our culture. Who will we even be without these fighter pilot songs or whatever it was? And I've seen the Air Force make that transition, and it's gone well. The culture and the traditions are still there. It's just the most over the top ones have kind of been weeded out. So the identity has not been lost. Everything that people were concerned about did not happen. But at the time, people were digging in their heels. And so I show up, and the squadron had recently been briefed that they needed to kind of watch what they would say, like the dirty jokes, like the sexist kind of things, that they needed, like that wasn't professional and that needed to stop at work. And I get there quickly after that, and people would still say those things because they're used to doing it. And when it would happen, everyone would stop talking and everyone in the room would turn and look at me and wait for my reaction. And a lot of times I'm like, some of it was funny. Some of it made me a little uncomfortable. It just depended what it was.
Yeah.
But me as the brand new lieutenant, early 20s, fresh out of flight school, just trying to figure out how to fly this aircraft, I hold the responsibility for setting the standards in the squadron for what's acceptable. That is not my job, and I don't want that responsibility. And so it was a burden.
Yeah.
Like it felt like such a burden. And all of that stuff is going on in the periphery. And not one of those things feels like insurmountable. But when you add it up all the time, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
And now I'm also in this super high performing environment. And exactly like you said, you come from such a high of getting the F-16, going to flight training, graduating, and then you get to your first combat squadron, and you within the first couple of flights figure out you know nothing. It's like insane how little you know. It's the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
I've had a lot of doctors resonate with that. They've been like, oh, we get it. Like you go through years and years and years of medical school, and then you get to residency and you're actually supposed to do the thing. You have no idea what you're doing. And for me as like a perfectionist and a high achiever, and I was being given all these accolades for being good at things, when I got there and suddenly wasn't good at the thing right away, I had like an identity crisis.
It's a gut check. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh shit, I don't deserve to be here. I somehow snuck through all of these wickets, and joke's on them because I am not good enough to do this job.
But you are. Because you somehow find renewed confidence in that journey. How did you get past all of that into the right headspace where you're ready to make bold choices again?
Yeah, it took some time. So, that struggle in Japan that I'm kind of talking about is 2012, 2013. By the end of that assignment, 3 years I was there, I was so burned out. The ops tempo is really, really busy there. 12 to 15-hour days is the norm. You just have no work-life separation because everyone lives on base because you're in a foreign country. You don't speak the language. So everyone in your life, they're all your coworkers, right? And they're great. Like, this is not a hit on them. But you just have no time to separate and decompress. You have no identity outside of that. So I was for sure struggling with my mental health, with motivation, all the things. I got my next assignment to go to Texas. And as I left Japan and headed there, it was kind of like this opportunity to rewrite how I wanted to show up. Because, of course, that squadron, I would have a general reputation in the F-16 community. The squadron would know some things about me as I was going there. But it was kind of this fresh start, and I could show up and, dive back in and learn as much as possible. And it was just at the right time. I went to the right place with the right people. And that squadron was actually a reserve unit, and I got tied to them as an active duty person. So as a reserve unit, their operations tempo is a little bit more chill. They have better work-life balance. They all had families. A lot of them were part-timers. They flew for the airlines. They had hobbies outside of work. It was just night and day environment compared to the first squadron I had been in.
Yep.
And I had a little bit of apprehension going to that squadron because as a reserve squadron, they get to pick who they hire. And people go through this very intense interview process where like 30 people are applying for one spot, and they, pick who they bring into their trust tree, because pilots aren't only coming there for 3 years like they are on active duty. People are coming there and staying for a whole career.
Sure.
So they are like curating who they bring onto that team and the personalities that they want. Because of that, that squadron had never had a woman in it ever.
Wow.
As a pilot.
Wow.
Not once. So they had a program where the active duty would send them like 5 or 6 pilots at a time. They had no say in who those pilots were. Big Air Force was like, here are the pilots that are going to be stationed with you for 3 years. That is how I ended up there. So I was forced upon them. And that made me nervous, right? Because I had kind of struggled with that a little bit on my first assignment. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to show up to this reserve squadron that's like the good old boys club. And they're going to be like, we don't want you here. We just have to deal with you for 3 years and then you're going to leave. I got there and they were the most welcoming group I had ever worked with. They were amazing. Some of my best friends, I, for the first time, had friends outside of work. I, for the first time, had hobbies outside of the Air Force. I felt like I could start to show up as myself. I didn't have to have this like Michelle and then Mace, where I pretend to be a Type A assertive fighter pilot that knows what I'm doing, even though inside I'm just like, I don't belong here and I don't deserve to be here. Instead, I could show up and be a little bit more vulnerable, share more about, my hobbies and my passions outside of just flying a jet.
Yep.
And as I started to do that, I started to make much closer relationships. And I started to find mentors and close friends. And it was like I suddenly had this support system that I just felt like I didn't have at the other squadron. And that allowed me, I think, to be a little bit more bold, to start to take advantage of opportunities that I would have otherwise really shied away from. And so that whole entire assignment is just, in my head, it's characterized by me just taking one tiny risk after another and them just starting to pay off. And over time, what felt like a risk, that threshold got higher. So, I went through the upgrade to become an instructor pilot. I got to deploy to Afghanistan. all of those things are like first time, so it's uncomfortable, there's unknown, you feel some self-doubt. But then I did them and I did them well. And then I'm like, okay, that builds your confidence. As your competence grows, your confidence grows. I got to go to Poland and fly their F-16s with them for a summer, which again, I was a little bit concerned about the cultural differences and being a woman as an instructor there. And they were amazing. I made great friends there, and it was such a cool growing learning experience.
Yeah.
And so each of those little things eventually got me to the point where at the very end of my assignment in Texas, I was supposed to go to New Mexico to a training base to train new F-16 pilots. I happened to see the email that the Thunderbirds were hiring, and it was something I'd always been interested in, but I'd never told anyone about because it's high pressure once you tell someone some big goal like that. So I didn't want that accountability. But I opened it, read it, and I was like, oh, I meet all of these qualifications to apply. And I'm feeling that feeling of excitement and like draw that I had gotten a few other times and gone after. I'm feeling that right now. And for the first time in my career, I actually believe that I could possibly get hired, where up until that point, I didn't think it was possible.
Michelle, I want to cut you off because I want to get to the Thunderbirds, but I got a few things I want to go back to. One is you talked about how you show up and deciding how you're going to show up at the next thing. And I think that's very important for our audience because we talk to a lot of people. We talk about transitioning into something new. But I think we don't talk about sometimes the mindset before you show up and the mindset that you have to have. And you and I both know as we transition from squadron to squadron and roles as the operations guy to the maintenance guy to the, to safety, you are given these new opportunities that you usually have no experience doing. But you get to show up and you get to prove yourself. Well, a lot of that proof is really in the confidence that you have. But you hit on it in that you're given a chance to go somewhere where maybe people know a little bit about you. So they're already kind of formulating a bias. But you get to make the determination when you walk through that door, who you are and how you're going to perform. And you can either step up and knock it out of the park, or you can succumb to some of those assumptions about you and kind of just slip into the role that you think is naturally best. So one, I wanted to highlight, what you said about that, because I think that's really important for especially people going into new careers where they have the time to think about how they want to show up and who they want to be, and they can reinvent themselves almost and not in a false way, but kind of elevate their performance to such a higher level than maybe what they were performing at before.
100%. It's, you'll see like the cheesy self-help stuff that's like every day is a new opportunity to reinvent yourself. But there is some truth to that.
Yeah.
And especially when you're making that big leap, whether that's a career transition or moving to a new city or just a new job title, I think there's some value in taking the time to lay out how you ideally would want to show up.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably don't execute it perfectly, but just taking the time to reflect on that, like, okay, what behaviors from what I've been doing do I want to carry forward, and what do I want to get rid of? And being intentional with how you show up at the next place
That's right.
just lays the groundwork to make that possible. Where if you just kind of go into it just how you normally do without any intention, things are probably going to stay the same, even if the job title has changed.
Another dimension that I heard from your comments, Michelle, was you, with this new squadron, there's a little bit of luck in everything in life, and you found this new squadron that you built a connection with, and that connection sort of also probably helped you build the confidence to perform at a high level with your colleagues in this particular squadron to move on to bigger and bolder things, which we'll get to in just a second here. But we often talk about on the second act this community of folks and the importance of connection in whatever endeavor you're pursuing in life, and how important that is to a lot of the success or failure that we have. So I don't know if you wanted to share any thoughts around that.
Yeah, one of the things that I struggled with during that first assignment was seeking out mentors and like being willing to ask for help and like show when I didn't know everything, and putting up this facade of knowing what you're doing even when you don't, and just being very surface level, you aren't going to find that community because people don't really get to know you. And so it wasn't even a fault to the people around me. I was doing it to myself because I really felt like I had to prove myself in that new environment. And that meant not showing weakness, right? And not showing vulnerability and stuff to develop deep connections with people when you're not willing to do that.
Yeah.
And going to that next squadron and just being welcomed so authentically by so many of them, where they were all different people with different things they liked, and they weren't trying to all be the same. That gave me kind of that safety net to feel like I could show up as I was as well, like show up authentically. And that's where that community started to form. And that's one of the things I talk about to people regularly now is the transition I've made into business out of active duty would not have been possible at all without the community of people that have supported me. I'm sure we'll get more into that, but now it's like one of the most important things for sure. And I just wrote it off as like, I can do everything myself. I don't need your help. And that was a big mistake on my part.
Well, the Thunderbirds is next, but you and I both know call signs, super important to who we are. It's our identity. You know, it usually comes from a great story. I've explained on the show many times before that call signs aren't usually from something great you've done. They're always from something that you wish you could take back. So your call sign's Mace, M-A-C-E. Tell us what it means.
So Mace is an acronym. I won't tell you exactly what it stands for, but I'll give you the broad overview of what happened. First assignment, Misawa. Second flight in country. I am like so brand new. The jets that squadron flies in Misawa have more powerful engines than the F-16s that I learned on in Arizona. Jet engines also perform a lot better in cold weather because of the air density.
Yep.
So I am in a more powerful engine in December in northern Japan, where they get like 200 inches of snow. It's cold. I had learned on the less powerful engine in Arizona in the summer. So my like very basic skill level as a brand new fighter pilot is super binary. It's like dogfighting. I know I should see this and I should light the afterburner all the way as far as it will go. And then I should count, and then I should roll and pull. Like, you're just not good at adapting to the different things you see because you're just so new. And so it was a dogfighting flight. So basic fighter maneuvering is what we call it. But like they saw in Top Gun, I feel like every person listening has probably seen that movie. I'm trying to point at the other airplane to employ weapons against it. It's still a training flight. I lit the afterburner, did the thing that worked really well for me in Arizona. I ended up going supersonic unintentionally. And then I rolled and pulled and hit a boatload of G's for a really long time because the jet was going so fast, had so much energy. I could just hold 9 G's all day, which I essentially did. And I almost G-locked, which is going unconscious from G-forces. So definitely a big mistake on my part. Could have been catastrophic. Honestly, F-16 pilots have died from G-locking and then the jet hits the ground. So it scared me a lot. It was one of the things that kind of led me down that path of feeling like I didn't belong in the career and wasn't good enough to be there. Now, when I share that story with people, they're like, "Oh yeah, I've done that." Other fighter pilots are like, "Yeah, that's standard. Every new fighter pilot has that experience." I'm like, I thought that I was the only one that almost G-locked. In the jet. But that flight ended up being what they named me after, Mace. So I'll let everyone wonder what the MACE stands for. It's always fun to hear people speculate.
Well, I've spelled out my call sign multiple times on the show, so I guess we'll put somebody.
Keep it a
put
mystery.
Your link in the show descriptions and let people reach out to you. But, all right. So you got the call sign Mace.
Yep.
You're midway through your career. You got the opportunity of a lifetime. For those listeners that don't know, each of our armed forces have demonstration teams. The Army has the Golden Knights. The Navy has the Blue Angels. Air Force has the Thunderbirds. Marine Corps. We get the Silent Drill Platoon. But you know,
what do you have?
well, I like to think it's Marine One.
Oh,
But-
yes, yeah.
But we don't really qualify as a demonstrations squadron because we're carrying out a task. But
Actually doing the mission. That's
A-
what you
a
were about
mission.
to say. I
A
saw
mission.
it. Anyway.
All right. So you got your dream shot. You have an application to the Thunderbirds, and you decide to take it.
Yep.
This is a group that requires the best of the best, the pilots that are at the top of their game. Maybe it's from multiple deployments, maybe it's from instructing, maybe it's from just where they're at in their career, but among the best of the best, precision is highly required.
It's incredible.
You now are applying. Tell us about that time.
Yeah, it felt like a bold move to throw my name in the hat for that. And I was very nervous. Nervous that I wouldn't get hired. Also nervous that I might get hired and what that would mean, right? Like, it's just all around nerve-wracking. The application process is really long. I think I applied right at, I would say, December or January. And the paper application is like 40-something pages is what mine was. It's all of your check rides, so those airborne tests that you've done for your whole career, physical fitness reports, letters of recommendations from like generals and commanders, a statement on why you want to be on the Thunderbirds, which holds a lot of weight.
Wow.
It's so many things. And then you email that all in, and then you wait. And I think in March, I got called out for the initial interviews in person. So you go out with the current team, meet them at an air show location, which ended up, I think, being in like April or May that we actually went and did that. 12 of us got brought out for 3 spots that were open that year. You get interviewed by the wing commander. You get interviewed by the squadron commander that leads the Thunderbirds. You get to watch a show. You get to see all the behind-the-scenes stuff because they want to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
Oh, yeah.
It is a lot more than just the flying. There's a whole other part of it, the Thunderbirding, as we call it, which is taking photos and shaking hands and signing autographs and having conversations that are sometimes weird with fans and just being on and being personable and representing the Air Force all the time. So we'll get into that more once I was actually doing that and experiencing what that was like. But we spent a whole weekend there. Maybe like a month goes by. We get called for finalist interviews. 6 of us get brought back to another airshow location to do that again. So now we're 6 for 3 spots. And we do more interviews, including a 12-person panel interview. There's 12 officers on the Thunderbird team. So they're all at this long boardroom table, and you sit at the head of it. And they go around and all just grill you with questions, and it was terrifying. But then once I was hired, I got to do that for other people. It's much more fun to be the one asking the questions.
To be on the other side of the table. Yeah.
Turns out. And then I think it was July that I finally got the call that I had made the team. So it was a lot of waiting and stressing and seeing my other assignment to New Mexico like rapidly approaching and not knowing if I was going to be going there or coming out to Vegas where the Thunderbirds are based. And then I got the call, and not only did they tell me that I was getting hired, but I was getting hired as number 6, the opposing solo, which was my first choice for sure of the 3 open positions. And I was very excited. I just remember riding that high for days, telling everyone that would listen. My poor reserve squadron was probably so tired of hearing about the Thunderbirds.
For the non-aviation audience members, what is the solo role inside the Thunderbird squadron? Just help folks understand what that means.
No, absolutely. So I'm assuming not everyone that's listening has even seen the Thunderbird, so I'll give you a real brief overview. It's a 130-person team. 8 of those people are pilots. 6 of those pilots actually fly in the demonstration, which I was one of. It's 6 F-16s. Just did the flyover for the Super Bowl. So if you watched that, you saw them for 0.5 seconds because the NFL coverage is terrible. Also, the Daytona 500, much better coverage. Anyway, 6 red, white, and blue F-16s. The diamond is one part of the formation. That's numbers 1 through 4. They are the ones that make the diamond shape. The lead jet, the jet on its left wing and its right wing, and then the jet like right behind the lead jet, which is called the slot pilot. So that's 1 through 4, the diamond. The outriggers, which are the far left and far right when you're all together as a 6 ship, are the solos. And so as solos, we do fly in the big formation for part of the air show, for flyovers, for that kind of thing. But for a lot of it, we split off, and we're either doing single jet maneuvers to really showcase what the F-16 is capable of. So we'll be doing like max climbs, flying upside down a lot of like aileron rolls or vertical rolls where I'd come in at 600 miles an hour, pull 8 to 9 Gs, and then spiral up to 15,000 feet, starting at 100 feet. Just showing how awesome that jet is and how high performance it is. Super fun. And you also don't have to look over your shoulder for an entire 45-minute demonstration, which is great. You also get to do a lot of head-on passes. You're like the shock and awe element of the show.
Yep.
The diamond is more graceful, and the solos are more just like afterburner, high speed, just impressive. And that just looked like a lot of fun. And so that's what I wanted as a position. I ended up getting that. Got hired as number 6, the posing solo. And then this always happens after your first year on the team. You kind of graduate and move into the lead solo position as number 5. And now you're in charge of that 2 element, or the 2 ship element, the 2 jets, like timing, radio calls, formations, all of that kind of stuff. And you also teach the new pilot, number 6, their maneuvers as they come on board. And so I ended up being number 5 for 2 years because I stayed for a 3rd year. Thanks to the pandemic, it added a year to our assignment. It's normally only 2 years total.
Well, I know I've watched a video of you ripping it. I think you did like a 360 in the F-16 over some boat show or something off the coast of a body of water, and
Huntington Beach,
super
California.
awesome clip. And I think you have, I forgot the song that you're playing in the background, but you just married the maneuvers with the music perfectly, and it's a great promo for your accomplishments.
Yeah.
My most watched video ever, the one you're just describing. Now it's Huntington Beach, California, the Pacific Air Show. You're doing the maneuvers over the just beautiful blue water of the Pacific Ocean, and all of the people bring their yachts out. They're definitely yachts, and park them right outside of the aerobatic box, which is like the restricted area that they keep people out of for FAA rules. And when you do that max turn, it's exactly as you described. It's a 360, 150 feet off the water. You are just looking down while you're pulling 9 Gs as like, oh, there goes a surely $10 million yacht. There goes a $5 million yacht. That person's in a swimsuit. Oh, that one's waving. And it's a crazy experience.
It's hard to appreciate the what you're doing in the plane and the video and like what's actually happening in the G-forces and the 360 maneuvers, but it's cool. Got to jump around playing, and I love it. So hopefully that stays available for people to watch forever. But like so many people we've come to know on our show, you're at the top of your game doing this awesome stuff, showcasing the capabilities of the F-16s and your skill sets as an aviator. But a big change is in store for you and the next chapter of your life. Tell us about that moment of decision and how it led to starting Upside Down Dreams, which is an awesome company name, by the way, and some of the cool things that this stage is bringing to your life.
Yeah, so it was a big decision, right? Because I had been on active duty for 13 years. I had gone through pilot training and then been flying the F-16 my entire career. So my entire adult life, I had been an active duty fighter pilot. So that was really all I knew from the time I graduated college on. And people will often ask, it's hard for people to comprehend why you would walk away from what seems like a dream job to so many people. When you tell a kid that you're a fighter pilot, it's like telling them that you're Superman or Superwoman, right? Like it's like one of those careers that doesn't seem real. Right. And then I think like Top Gun has made it even more over the top because it's just become like more mainstream. People are like, well, that seems cool. 13 years, a lot of G's. My body was really beat up. I was kind of in constant back pain. Like every day I've had back pain. I still have it now. I've just learned to deal with it and do some things to make it less impactful. And like we mentioned earlier, like all my hobbies involved the outdoors and fitness and pushing myself. And I was starting to wonder if I stayed for 20 years and continued to do what I was doing, if I would be able to do that stuff a decade from now, right? Because I was just dealing with so many physical ailments. So that was for sure a concern. I also met my husband on Bumble when I moved here to
Nice.
Vegas. Yeah, everyone that's on Bumble, there is hope. And so we met, right when I got out here for the Thunderbirds, and we got married during my first airshow season.
Oh, wow.
And so our first 3 years of marriage, I was on the road 240 days a year for those whole 3 years. So, I mean, we managed it. It was fine, but that's just not, like, you can't grow a relationship. It's like,
Yeah.
that was like the starter kit version of our marriage. And then once I left active duty, I was actually here all the time. It was like actually getting to know each other.
It's a whole new challenge within a challenge.
100%. It's so, like, this person you've been married for years, and you, like, still really don't know the little stuff that gets on each other's nerves, the boundaries that you need to create. Like, it's just such a strange phenomenon that I think a lot of people in the military experience.
Yeah.
And he had a son, so now I have a stepson, and building that relationship with him. When we met, he was 5. And so trying to build this relationship as a stepmom, my priorities just started to shift. And I was like, I need something that's easier on my body, that gives me more freedom with my schedule, more flexibility. My husband has his own career that's going. We're not going to pick up and move every 3 years across the country. My son's mom is here, and we have a very good working relationship with it. Like, the active duty just wasn't in the cards anymore.
Yeah.
And so kind of those things led me to start to think about other options. And the most natural transition for fighter pilots when they get out, or pilots in general, is to go to the airlines. And it's a great time to go to the airlines. They're paying well, they're hiring like crazy. But it just didn't get me that excited. I kind of dreaded it. I was like, I know it's kind of easy money eventually once you get seniority, but I don't know. It just doesn't get me fired up. I'm not passionate about that.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be a face in the crowd there, a number in like a huge company. And while I was with the Thunderbirds, it became very apparent to me how impactful what I was doing was to inspire people, especially girls and women.
Yeah.
I got to see that impact firsthand day in, day out while we were on the road. And it was such a fulfilling feeling to do that for people. I was like, I don't want to take this uniform off after the last air show and never get to do that again. And so I started to think about ways on the civilian side that I could, have a little bit more freedom and flexibility and get a chance to tell my story in a way that felt really true to me and also could impact a lot of people. And halfway through my time on the Thunderbirds, one of the guys that we flew in the backseat, who has a big YouTube channel, reached out and was like, hey, Mace, if you ever wanted to get into keynote speaking, I think there would be a huge opportunity for you. Because I had been interviewed on his channel and I got really good feedback. And I was just in the middle of surviving my Thunderbird assignment. So I was like, sure, whatever. Good idea, not a priority right now.
Yeah.
But as I got to that point where I needed to decide what I was going to do, I started to think about that more and more. And I reached back out to him. He was great about mentoring me and giving me some direction. And in the fall, after my last Thunderbird season was wrapping up, I got my first inquiry for a paid speaking event that was far enough out that it was after I was leaving active duty. I was like, oh, like this could actually be a thing.
Yeah.
And that's when I just started to explore the industry. And I was like, this could definitely be a thing. And there's people out there crushing it doing this. And telling my story felt really cathartic for me because I had struggled at so many points in my career and felt really alone at so many points. And now with experience and just maturity that comes with time, I realize how common those struggles I was having are. And I was like, if I get up there with my background, them seeing this, like what they view as perfection in the Thunderbirds, they don't expect Thunderbird pilots to have gone through all of these same relatable things that humans all go through of self-doubt and fear and all of that. And so if I just am so honest about that stuff, it feels good to me to be honest about that. And it's impactful to them because they all of a sudden realize that those feelings that they have won't stop them from doing big things.
Yep.
And I've just kind of jumped in head first left the Air Force, decided to go create my company, work for myself, wrote a children's book, have a second children's book coming out. That's a sequel to the first one, which is also called,
nice.
First one's called Upside Down Dreams, same as the company. I have a bunch of stuff in the works that I can rattle off, but I don't want to go into like 10 minutes of self-promotion. But anyway, I'm loving what I'm doing.
We'll help you do that when we release the episode. But yeah, I mean, you bring hope to people who are shy and reserved, and that there's hope for them to be public speakers one day or do big, ambitious things. You bring hope to young women who see some of these industries that are male dominated and like, hey, you can do this too. I mean, there's so many things you're hitting on when it comes to having a hopeful outlook on where people can go with their dreams and aspirations. It's really an awesome story, Michelle.
No, thank you.
And I'll say that we also talk on here about helping the people behind you. And that's exactly what you're doing. You know, you're on a pedestal with the Thunderbirds, and people think that you are at the peak of your perfection, but you're still making mistakes. While they may not be, you know, show center or visible to somebody that doesn't know what to, you know, exactly look for, you're still making mistakes, and you're still dealing with imposter syndrome, and you're still dealing with, you know, who am I? Why am I in this platform when I'm not
100%.
performing at, you know, a place that I think I should be performing, you know? And that's so valuable to be able to capture that and give it to somebody and say, listen, I'm making the same mistakes you are. It just looks different. And here's how we can collaborate and how you can become better. And so I really appreciate, you know, that aspect of it, because the stage like you're on with the Thunderbirds, just, you know, people think I could never reach that, but you give them some hope that you're just another person. You're just making the same mistakes they are, maybe just not as, you know, in the same scenario. So I really, really appreciate what you're doing up on stage for those people. And now you're motivating others on a large scale. And as we bring the show to a close, I want to ask you, like we do all of our guests, what personal advice would you like to leave our audience with that are contemplating just starting out in something new, something that potentially is scary, or walking into a place where maybe the personality doesn't match what they think they're bringing in to that, you know, arena? What advice would you give somebody?
I will definitely tell your audience one of the key things that I push to my live audiences during speeches, and that's that the key to progressing towards what you want is having the courage to start, even when you don't feel ready.
Yep.
But you just have to believe in yourself enough to know you'll figure it out along the way. And I think we put other people on a pedestal, you know, people that we admire, whether it's athletes or celebrities or people in our industry that are just crushing it or whatever. Every single one of them was a beginner at one point. And when you show up to somewhere new, that feeling of imposter can very easily start to derail you. So I encourage people to just accept that they're a beginner and to realize that there's going to just be a period where they don't know things, and they just have to embrace it, and that everyone that they admire has gone through those periods.
Absolutely.
And when you just accept that you're a beginner, and it's not that you don't deserve to be there, that you're not smart enough, that you're not qualified, that you're not deserving, it's just that they're new, and you give yourself some grace, it just shifts that narrative a little bit, where you can kind of just accept that you're going to make missteps, you're going to have to ask for help, and being forgiving with yourself in that initial period when things are new and scary and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But having the confidence that you will figure it out, that's the keys to the castle. That is how everyone goes and does big things.
That is some great advice to leave our audience with. And Michelle, your story should make anyone believe that anything is possible. Coming from a small town in rural Wisconsin to being the lead solo of an elite squadron, fighter jet squadron, to now starting your own business and being a public speaker and an inspiration for so many. You know, thank you for coming on our show.
Yep.
And I know there's many listeners who want to get in touch and learn more about the things you're working on. you're well known now in some spaces, but what is the best way for people to find you, and if they need some inspiration to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm very findable online, sometimes to a fault. So it depends what platform they're on. I'm very active on Instagram. It's just at Mace_Curran. So _my last name. And all the things I have in the works I post about there, along with a lot of just life stuff like workouts and family trips and dogs and, normal people stuff. For more business focused, LinkedIn for sure. And it's Michelle Mace Curran. So I do have my call sign thrown in the middle there. Website, macecurran.com. I try to be consistent across all platforms to make it easy to find me. And on all of those, I share the kids' book, the new one. I have a course that's coming out next month. And I always call it an adult book, which is apparently not the way you're supposed to describe it. I have a book for adults, a personal development book that I can't say a lot about, but that is in the works and will be announcing later this year with cover art and all the things. And I think that'll be exciting for a lot of people. I'm excited about it. So I've got lots of stuff coming out. Those are the best places to learn about any of it.
Well,
Awesome.
We'll be sure to include your links in the show notes.
Yep.
It's funny, all that consistency with your call sign, yet no one knows what the call sign truly means. So with that, I encourage everyone listening to reach out to Michelle because, man, I'll tell you, the hour and a half I got to spend with her last year in Las Vegas, I get to realize how unique she is and, just a truly amazing person and inspiring even, for me. So reach out and just get to know Mace on a different level. And man, thank you so much again for being on the show and encouraging people to just be bold, be brave, to be persistent, and be open to new things, because really how you walk into things with the confidence you walk into, that's what you're going to be able to achieve. So,
100%. And I'm sure your listeners already know this, but I felt the same way chatting to you. I was like, oh, this guy gets it. Like, we're talking about the same things here, same kind of like mindset around going after things. So it was just a refreshing conversation. I'm glad we could make this happen.
Yeah.
And I feel honored to be a guest. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
well, Michael, man,
Yes, sir.
amazing episode.
Amazing discussion. Yeah.
Probably one of my top episodes. I think I say that a lot, but I think this one really was, because it just allows me to go back to my days of flight school training, to imposter syndrome, to one day waking up on this massive stage and thinking, holy cow, how did I make it? And aren't there way better people than me that they didn't choose? So really, appreciated Michelle's story. And man, I just look forward to doing this again, and let's crush it next week. All right.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Yep. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.